It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. You can find out more about me on the socials. I'm on X and also on Facebook. Follow me on both if you would, at Dan Mandis Show. I very reluctantly posted the video. If you haven't seen it yet, it is horrifying. But the video of that woman in New York that was set afire by an illegal alien from Guatemala. And that was in the New York subway system. Horrible, horrible story. It is all over the place this morning. And it's just another example of our broken immigration system here in America. And this is also what happens in sanctuary cities. And so it is a story that we've been talking about forever. And it leads, that conversation leads to all kinds of other discussions about Donald Trump and Tom Homan and deporting all of the illegal aliens. And it is an ongoing conversation. By the way, I thought Donald Trump had a great speech in Phoenix for America Fest, Turning Point USA. It was over the weekend, and the president did have a lot of great things to say. It was, by Trump standards, actually a pretty short speech. It was only like an hour and 10 minutes or so, but there was a lot packed in that hour and 10 minutes.
And for all of us standing before you today, I can proudly proclaim that the golden age of America is upon us.
Clearly a friendly crowd.
It's going to be a golden age. There's a spirit that we have now that we didn't have just a short while ago. Sadly, we didn't have. Who the hell can have spirit?
I think the president-elect is right when he says that there is a certain spirit that we have in America right now. And I think the reason why, and please don't get me wrong, I am a supporter of Donald Trump. I've voted for him several times now. But I think that the reason for the optimistic spirit in America is because, yes, Donald Trump and all that he wants to get done, but also because with the previous administration, it is so bad and it has been so dysfunctional. And now the story that came out last week about Joe Biden and the Wall Street Journal reporting that there is this massive cover-up, and they were covering up Joe Biden's dementia. And so whether we're talking about Joe Biden's dementia, whether we are talking about his very poor decisions or the decisions made on his behalf by those that were covering for him, these have been dark times here in America. And so there's a lot of folks that have been living through all of this, and we've all become very frustrated. And that is why we feel like that really there is it's morning in America. And part of what Donald Trump has been, part of his platform was ending the wokeness that we've seen across America.
And woke has to stop, because along with everything else, it's destroying our country. We're going to stop woke. Woke is bullshit.
There you go. And he did say that on day one, the president-elect saying on day one, that he's got a number of things that he wants to do when it comes to genders.
With a stroke of my pen on day one, we're going to stop the transgender lunacy. And I will sign executive orders to end child sexual mutilation, get transgender out of the military and out of our elementary schools and middle schools and high schools. And we will keep men out of women's sports.
I mean, listen, I love all of that.
And that will likewise be done on day one. Should I do day one, day two, or day three? How about day one, right?
How about day one?
Under the Trump administration, it will be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
So there you have it, President-elect Donald Trump. Again, it was an hour and 10 minutes, and it was a great speech. One of the things that the president said, and it's making a lot of headlines, is that Donald Trump is threatening to take back the Panama Canal. Now, this wasn't entirely surprising if you know anything about Donald Trump. He's spoken about this in the past, and you know there's a lot of people across America who have been angry that Jimmy Carter basically gave the Panama Canal back to Panama way back in 1977. And so he was speaking to this massive crowd. Donald Trump was speaking to this massive crowd in Arizona at the Turning Point USA America Fest. And he did talk about wanting to take back the Panama Canal, whether they like it or not.
It's such a terrible thing is happening. The Panama Canal is considered a vital national asset for the United States of America due to its critical role, American economy, the whole world economy, and also national security. The Panama Canal. Has anyone ever heard of the Panama Canal? Huh? Because we're being ripped off at the Panama Canal like we're being ripped off everywhere else.
So this has long raised the ire of Republicans. Back in 1977, Jimmy Carter gave the Panama Canal back to Panama, even though we designed it, we built it for the most part, we paid for it. Americans died building it, as a matter of fact.
So we built it. We're the ones that use it. They gave it away. The Panama Canal opened for business 110 years ago and was built at huge cost to the United States. And it really is big when you consider the lives and the treasure, the equivalent of $1.2 trillion today. You don't hear those numbers.
Yeah, so the Panama Canal, if you don't know, it was built to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and we do have a massive amount of ships that sail through the Panama Canal. It is critical for our trade routes and our supply chains. 70% of the ships that sail through it are leaving or going to United States ports. And so Trump was talking about how 38,000 American men, mainly he said, died because of either accidents or disease because of the infected mosquitoes and malaria. Now, here's really what Trump is talking about. There's two big things. Number one is China, and we're going to get into that. But there is a severe drought that impacted the prices there at the Panama Canal. Apparently, the less water, the higher the prices. So what I've read is there was a drought, the water level went down, the water level rose back up when the rains came back. However, the prices remained high. And so that's one of the things that Trump is really ticked off about is now that the water levels, he believes, they're back to normal, so the prices should go down. But that's, according to the president, not what happened. And so now he is making this threat that he wants to get the Panama Canal back. One big issue Trump has also is who is managing the canal. He says it's China.
It was solely for Panama to manage and not for China or any other country to manage. You see what's going on there? Mm-hmm. China.
Well, so here's what's going on. China, over the years, has begun investing in the Panama Canal, specifically its operations and the ports on either side. So we spent all that money building it way back when, but now China comes along, and they've been working some construction projects in the last several years as the Panama Canal expands, and they have to upgrade it and update it and so forth. So I'm just going to kind of bullet point here. But China controls ports on either end of the canal. China's construction companies have massive deals with the canal as well. And there are worries that China could also monitor our naval and commercial ships as well. And so there's a national security risk if they're able to basically, one way or another, spy on our naval and commercial ships. And so with the Panama Canal, part of the deal that Carter made was that this concept of neutrality has to continue, where the canal is supposed to be neutral for all countries that want access to it. But with all of this Chinese involvement, Donald Trump, the incoming president, and by the way, it's not just Donald Trump, it's a lot of folks, are worried about the Panama Canal's neutrality in the future. Because the more that China becomes involved, the more America worries that China could have some overdue influence on Panama as they continue to run the Panama Canal. And Trump and many other people, by the way, are worried about this as well.
China now controls it. They actually control the Panama Canal. They run
This is what he said to Tucker Carlson.
it. They control it. And we shouldn't let that happen. And we can't let China be in Cuba. And they'll get out. If I'm president, they'll get out. Because I had a very good relationship with President Xi, but he respected this country. He respected me. And he'll get out. And we can't let them run the Panama Canal.
So, does China run the Panama Canal? Depends on who you ask, but certainly the folks that are in Panama and Panama's president are saying, no, China does not run the Panama Canal. But here's the other thing, and if you listen closely to that audio bite, you heard Donald Trump saying, and this was during the election, where he said, if I'm president, China will get out.
China now controls it. They actually control the Panama Canal. They run it. They control it. And we shouldn't let that happen. And we can't let China be in Cuba. And they'll get out. If I'm president, they'll get out. Because I had a very good relationship with President Xi, but he respected this country. He respected me. And he'll get out. And we can't let them run the Panama Canal.
So does China run the Panama Canal? I don't know. I've seen people that say, oh, absolutely, China's running the Panama Canal. I've seen a lot of other people say, no, the fact checkers with the breathy eye roll. No, China does not run the Panama Canal. Panama will say, no, they have relationships with China, but they also have relationships with America. But China has helped to expand the canal. They've got the Belt and Road Initiative. And so part of that is that they have construction projects all across the country. I should say all across the world, China does, including there at the Panama Canal. It's part of what they do. And so Donald Trump, of course, again, making headlines this weekend by saying that, yes, he does want the Panama Canal back.
You got to treat us fairly, and they haven't treated us fairly. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to the United States of America in full, quickly, and without question. I'm not going to stand for it. So to the officials of Panama, please be guided accordingly.
So there's two things. Number one, and by the way, part of what might be going on is, the folks in Panama will say, no, China is not running the Panama Canal. However, it's all about influence, and it's all about neutrality as well. So it could be true that China has undue influence over the Panama Canal, and Donald Trump and others feel like there's not the neutrality that has been promised. Plus, again, you have the situation with the prices. Panama's president, by the way, Jose Raul Molino, posted a video on social media Sunday night last night rejecting Donald Trump's demands, saying the sovereignty and independence of our country are not negotiable, Molino said. Our canal has the mission to serve humanity and its commerce. He says that is one of the greatest values that the Panamanians offer to the world. And so Trump, in response, posted a picture of the Panama Canal, but the title was U.S. Canal, kind of trolling Panama's president. And Trump also, by the way, quoting the president of Panama's, his response on Truth Social, he said, "We'll see about that," when the president of Panama said the sovereignty and independence of our country are not negotiable. So big question is, how far is Donald Trump going to push this? By the way, he is also talking about buying Greenland again. Right now, Denmark owns it. Melting ice caps have opened up North Atlantic shipping lanes that they say can help shorten shipping travel times, save a lot of money, be more efficient. They've also got some amazing resources there in Greenland as well. Apparently, China is looking at it as well. And so everywhere you turn, China is right there. And we know that Donald Trump does see China as the threat that they are. By the way, right now, Denmark says whether it is the United States or whether it's China, basically Greenland is not for sale. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. We'll return next. This is Red Eye Radio.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
A holiday tradition continues as Santa gets news what weather will be like on his Christmas night travels. His guide? No, that's just in case of intense fog. Rudolph is not needed this year, according to USDA meteorologist Mark Brusberg.
I would tell him that he's going to have a pretty calm ride
as he crosses the U.S. this holiday. Only high elevation mountains and parts of the upper Midwest expect below freezing temperatures Christmas Eve. Snow-wise, other than those tall peaks,
going to be a little snow remaining in the upper Midwest from some of the storms that are going through this week, but he won't have to worry about falling off too many rooftops this year.
Parts of the deep south may experience thunderstorms Christmas Eve. And as for potential fog,
I think Santa and Rudolph are going to get off easy this year.
Which makes for one jolly old elf and one happy reindeer. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here, and Brian is listening to our big affiliate, WBAP in Dallas. Kansas City is on the phone. Brian, go ahead. Thanks.
Well, thank you for taking my call. I was curious as to what you may think this is, that since President Biden seems to have dementia or Alzheimer's or mental issues in some way, shape, or form, that the pardons since Hunter and beyond, and I'm sure he's going to do more, that he's handing out, can they be contested by the victims of those people that...
No, Brian, once there's a presidential pardon made, as far as I know, those cannot be reversed. I mean, unfortunately, and I appreciate the call out of Kansas City. As a matter of fact, this news just came down. Biden commutes the sentences of 37 inmates on federal death row. President Joe Biden, again, this just coming down. President Biden commuting the sentences of 37 inmates on federal death row. The move reduces the sentence for all but 3 of the 40 inmates on federal death row. Biden said that the commutations are consistent with the moratorium my association, he says, has imposed on federal executions, with the exception of terrorism and hate-motivated mass killings. According to the White House fact sheet about the move, the recipients will have their sentences reclassified from execution to life without the possibility of parole. Got a lot more straight ahead. Red Eye Radio.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio. Season's greetings from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Let's say hello to Alan, who is calling from Panama City, I guess near the Panama Canal. Alan, how are you?
Hey, hi, good morning, Dan. I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
I'm all right. So are you from Panama City originally?
Absolutely no. I'm a retired guy from California, Silicon Valley. Been down here about 8 years. I live in Panama City. It probably takes me, with no traffic, about 15 minutes to get to the canal itself. I can actually see it from my balcony, and there is obviously a lot of influence from the Chinese side here in the city, in the country. And I'm more than happy to be your eyes and ears down here if you're interested. There already is a lot of scuttlebutt.
Yeah, I bet. Well, all right. So Alan, let me pepper you with some questions. So you talk about the Chinese influence, and folks, if you're just joining us, Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, is saying that he is threatening to take back, one way or another, the Panama Canal. He's worried mainly, I believe, about Chinese influence. Alan, talk about the Chinese influence. You just mentioned it. Is it something that you can, see just in the day-to-day operation of the Panama Canal from your experience there, 15 minutes from the canal? Is it it evident to you?
It's really not. It's really under the radar, if you will. Yep. Obviously, there's a large Chinese contingency here from the day the canal was even started. So there's a large Chinese population down here. You can't see it physically. You can't hear about it physically, but you can feel the undertow, if you will, of the influence down here on either side of the canal. I live on the Middle Florida side and the Pacific side, but both sides. Over in Cologne, the other side is very busy with a lot of the Chinese companies that are starting to do some development work on the Cologne side. Cologne side is where they have a big free trade zone and a lot of other businesses down there, and it's quite well populated. But the influence is really under the radar at this point. However, I remember I was here, like I said, I've been here about 7 or 8 years, and I remember actually when V did come down here. I lived in the city, and there was all kinds of Chinese flags waving around. And one of the areas that we live in is called the Centro Costera. It's a beautiful area developed by President Martinelli when he was in office. And many red Chinese flags were up and down the roads. It was really pretty obvious. But a lot of it, Dan, is really under the radar at this particular time, although my wife owns a hair salon here in the city, and people have started to come into her salon and talk just like you do in a barber shop or in a hair salon about some of the things that Trump is saying about the canal. There's kind of this murmuring, really, are we going to be invaded again? What's going to happen? So there's a lot of things that are going on that you can feel the vibe going on, but you can't really see it or hear it on the news or any of that nature.
Well, China controls ports, they say, on both ends of the canal. In my segment before, I was talking about how China has this Belt and Road Initiative where they basically have massive construction projects all across the world to spread Chinese influence. And that is certainly happening there at the Panama Canal. And talk a little bit about the mentality of the region, because when you read into this, the president of Panama right now and presidents previous, they all talk about how the canal is a big part of the identity, as you can imagine, of Panama, and it's part of their sovereignty. And so, talk a little bit about how the average person that lives in Panama and the local government would react to the incoming president saying something like that. It's pretty explosive.
it's not only part of the sovereignty, it's part of the economy. I mean, at the end of the day, we just opened up a deep water port here about 2 years ago to allow the cruise ship to virtually dock here in an area called Amador out by one end of the city. Beautiful area out there where the ships coming in and out of the canal. And it's really, from an economic standpoint, it's the lifeblood of Panama at this point. People are really, really, really depending on the revenue, whether it be the higher rates that we're charged by now having a better water level to anything else economically. People are really dependent upon this. We're trying to develop higher levels of tourism, if you will, and that all plays into the canal. We're developing other parts of the country. We have a strong coffee plantation area in Boquete and other parts of the country. But the canal in and of itself is virtually the lifeblood of the country. And anything to jeopardize that will be pushed back significantly, whether it be political terms or any other way. It's critical. The canal is critical for the country at this point.
Talk about, because in my reading on this, they talk about how when there was the drought, the water level in the canal was lower, so they have to raise up the prices.
Right.
The accusation is that the rains came back and the water level is now normal, but the fee that they charge ships to go through has remained higher. President-elect Trump says we're getting ripped off. Talk a little bit about how they set the prices there within the canal.
Well, as I understand it, is that the prices are set on tonnage of the craft coming through the canal in and of itself, whether it be a cruise ship or a private yacht that actually can use the canal, which they do frequently. So it's really based on the tonnage of the ship in and of itself. Then I don't have the details about other pricing involved, but it's really based on the tonnage of the ships coming through. But I think once again, Molino, he's only been in office maybe 9 months or less, maybe 6 months. But he's really started to make some significant changes, and there's a lot of feeling of unity of people here with the canal being owned by Panama. And so a lot of people are very, very concerned that may be interrupted because the lifestyle obviously depends on that. Panama doesn't have a lot to offer with regards to minerals and different materials to be able to sell outside the country. So it really is dependent on the canal, and pricing is certainly significant. And if there's additional revenue coming in from the tonnage of the ships coming through, then so be it, and they're happy about that. But they're really dependent on the canal. It's as simple as that.
One of the things, Alan, final question here, but one of the things that was written about a lot is this neutrality, where all nations are supposed to have equal access to the canal. And so Trump and a lot of folks on our side are worried about this influence that China may have. And there's a worry that this neutrality will not be in favor of America or China. There won't be neutral. It'll be balanced more towards China. How seriously do you think they take that neutrality demand?
I think the country in and of itself with Molino, and not only did the new president Molino come in, but the new Congress, if you will, and it's very much of a younger generation to the chagrin of some of the older guys that have been entrenched in the politics for a while here. But at the end of the day, the neutrality is critical for these people here. They 100% agree with Trump, if you will, from keeping the canal very independent and neutral on a global perspective. I don't think there's anybody, excuse me, that I've talked to or listened to that says, well, we should go one way or the other. I think the influence of the old Martinelli government, along with the new Molino government, is very linear with regards to keeping it neutral.
Well, I think part of what I said, Alan, and I appreciate the call. And Alan, back at the studio, can you get Alan in Panama Cities? Get his phone number, would you? Because, yeah, I might want to call him back at some point, and I bet you Gary and Eric would also love to have him as a resource. So, Alan, thank you very much for the call. And I think part of what's going on is that Trump, this is part of what he does. Donald Trump, part of what he likes to do is he likes to set a table for a negotiation. That's what he likes to do. And so the more that he sets the table for a negotiation, the more he puts everyone else on notice, and he'll say, listen, I believe that the United States is being charged too much, and we believe that China is having an undue influence, and so we need to take a long look at this thing, and perhaps Trump can negotiate a better deal. You see, with Donald Trump, it is always about the art of the deal. That's the name of his book. And for me, I've seen this with Donald Trump 1,000 times. And so do I believe that the president-elect is going to use our military to try to take over the Panama Canal? No, I don't. Do I believe that he is putting China and the Panama Canal, the president of Panama, on notice? And do I believe that he is saying, I know what you're up to, and it's going to stop? Yeah, I think there's a big part of that as well. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here. This is Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Van Jones, just going to wrap it up with this. Van Jones, of course, you know that he is a Democrat operative. And he was talking about how the political landscape, the media landscape, has completely changed. And he's talking about the mainstream media versus podcasts
in the Philly suburbs. And I'm telling you, we are way off. The entire political class is way off. First of all, digital is a new door knocking. Mm-hmm. You got to understand that. We were laughing our butts off at Donald Trump for suspending his door knocking campaign and letting Charlie Kirk and Elon do a bunch of stuff online. Mm-hmm. We said, these guys are idiots. These guys are stupid. Then you start knocking on these doors. You know what people come to the door with? Their phone in their hand.
Yep.
They're in a 24-hour digital surround sound that has nothing to do with CNN, has nothing to do with any stuff that we do.
And here's the thing, is that one of the big, in my opinion, one of the big reasons why Donald Trump won the election was because he went and he did the podcast with not only Joe Rogan, but a whole bunch of other podcasters as well. Kamala Harris did, I think, one major podcast. I forget the name of the podcast, but it was with that woman. But you know what? She wouldn't go on with Joe Rogan. And she made it so incredibly difficult for Rogan to be able to go see her because he said, listen, she said, come see me. I'll give you an hour. And he was like, no. Donald Trump came to my studio in, I think it's Austin. And so I'm extending that to you. She refused. And so Donald Trump got all of that play, all of that attention when he sat down with Joe Rogan and his 100 million views and downloads and all of that. And I'm telling you that was a big turning point. That was a big turning point for the election. And a lot of people are saying that why would Donald Trump go on any kind of the mainstream media these days, given the fact that he does have access to the Joe Rogans of the media world? But then as soon as he got elected into office, there he is with Kirsten Welker on his, I think she Meet the Press. I think she Meet the, whatever. So Trump does recognize that there are different types of media, and they function, perhaps, I guess, in different ways. But Van Jones is absolutely right. That was, in my opinion, a pivotal turning point in the election. Because I think it showed, number one, it showed a lot of the mettle of Donald Trump. Because he was willing to go for 3 hours with Joe Rogan. No notes, no teleprompter, just a conversation. And one of the things that we certainly know and knew at the time about Kamala Harris is that she could not do that. We all said this. There is no way that Kamala Harris could sit down and do what Donald Trump did. And so Van Jones is right. The mainstream media, they can try to cling to their influence, but it's diminishing by the day.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.